critical role, not just in repairing railroad tracks and laying track during the war, but also destroying what the little South had. During Sherman's march to the sea, you had blacksmiths that went with all these units. And one of the ways you knew that Sherman's army had been through an area, when they would get done defeating them in battle, they would take the railroad tracks that were there, and they would heat them up and tie them in the shape of a bow tie. And that was a way of telling the South, our work is done here. We're never going to use these tracks again, okay? It was a stick in the eye kind of a thing, all right? And, but one other thing he did too, and I like to talk about this, one of the other, share these books. Oh, no, that's not going to the before. That's not the bag. Well, anyhow, and where it went. Dr. Dorothy Schweeder taught at Iowa State for years and years, and she was a good friend of mine. And her textbook called Iowa: The Middle Land has one of the best short chapters on Iowa's role in the Civil War. And she does talk in there about Grenville Dodge. And one of the things that Dodge did, in addition to his building and tearing up railroad tracks and so on, was he established a spy network. And he got this book here is Iowa Confederates in the Civil War. These are Iowans who fought for the Confederacy. And on the flip side of that, there were Southerners that had moved to Iowa that became excellent spies and worked for Grenville Dodge. And Mary Malone was a very effective spy for Grenville Dodge from Fort Dodge, Iowa. Okay? Women play, what was the, I'm trying to think of the title of another book that I have. It was something about, I can't think of it, but it's all about prominent roles played by women. Both combat, where they were large women to start with in size, cut their hair short. It goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War with Deborah Sampson. She was 6'2", and fought at major battles in the Revolutionary War. And when she was wounded, they discovered she was a woman. But not for a long time. She treated herself. Same thing happened in the Civil War. Not a lot of women, but they played a variety of roles in addition to dietary condition, dietary kitchens and nurses and things like that. There's more traditional types of roles. But so he set up a spy network, which is very effective. All right. Part of the Western Theater, where two rivers come together. You can see it, the Cumberland and the Tennessee. They had these two forts. Fort Henry, it wasn't much of a fort. It fell quickly. Donelson, it falls on February 16th of 1862, and I always remember that date because that's my birthday. But Donelson itself is a well-fortified position for the Confederates, and it took a number of assaults led by Iowans. The 2nd Iowa plays a critical role, and there's a book written about it. You'll see more in a minute here. But that will open up the Tennessee River, which will play an important role later at a much more important battle at Shiloh. I told you about replenishing the troops by river. Controlling the rivers is important. All right. This is the 2nd Iowa charging at Fort Donelson, and look at the guy in the middle with the flag. That is Voltaire Twombly. Yeah, that's his real name. All right, he's over 6'4". The most dangerous job in battle was being the flag bearer. He is the 3rd one in this charge. 2 others have been shot. And he picks up the flag, and they wanted a tall guy so everyone could see the flag. Every sniper that the Confederates have is aiming at him. He's wounded, and he charges up the hill and plants the flag at the top. The Medal of Honor was conceived by an Iowan, and over 50 will receive it for valor in the Civil War, and he's one of them. He's one of them. He survives this incredible battle. The North wins. Flag bearers, Diamond does it. They're shot and shot and shot. That's the priority of any sniper out there. Shoot the flag bearer, shoot the general. 2 most important people you can kill out there. You can read it. Talks about Medal of Honor recipient. All right. And here's the amazing thing. That's the flag. It belongs to the State Historical Society. And it gets better. When I was still on the board, I was on the board from 1999 until 2015. And we had a battle flag preservation project going on down there. And they took a blood sample from this flag, and with DNA testing, they could confirm that it was Voltaire's Twombly, and then they traced it to living relatives.
Wow.
It made big news. It's amazing stuff you can do. And as our research methods and preservation methods have improved over the years, we can learn a lot about things we thought were pretty cut and dry in history that we didn't know. We wouldn't have known about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Heming if it wasn't for DNA testing. And so, again, I always taught my students that history is a process, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you have better research methods and thorough research and so on, if we have to change it, we've always believed. I teach courses for Ollie Drake, which is Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. I teach them at Iowa State as well. But in December, 3 consecutive Mondays, I'm going to be teaching a course called Reinventing Iowa, Myths in American History. And it's fun. Just to give you an example of one. Paul Revere never made it to do the warning, okay? He got captured by British troops. 2 other riders that nobody knows did make it. A young girl helped, okay? Paul Revere was a much better self-promoter, all right? That's why we all know Paul Revere. Well, Longfellow helped them out. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, okay? And so, well, anyway, the course will be kind of fun, but I'll probably upset a few people. All right. Prominent trailhead, or a railroad head, okay? Control transportation during war. That's what you want to do. And you can go to the next one. The Battle of Corinth. Rebel charge. The Union troops are dug in. Again, one of those chromolithographs. There are a number of these that exist, and they're gorgeous. I mean, they really are. If you can say that about people killing each other. All right. All right. One of the, there are 4 people that are recognized on the Soldiers and Sailors Monument south of the Capitol. This is one of them, okay? Marcellus Crocker, okay? Ryan, of course, okay? But I've been program chair for the Des Moines Civil War Roundtable for 26 years. We're the oldest, we're the largest. We took a hit during COVID like everybody else did. We rebuilt our numbers and so on. But we have 2 members. Jeff Cleaver's one of them. And he is an Iowan, went to Grinnell College. But he ended up being a docent in Virginia for some of the Civil War sites. And when Jeff moved back with his family to Iowa, he lives now in Norwalk. And Jeff made himself the expert on Woodland Cemetery. And Woodland Cemetery is a treasure trove of Des Moines and Iowa history. Prominent business people, governors buried there, and all kinds of important people in the Civil War. Jeff gives a tour, which is absolutely spectacular. And he knows so much about that cemetery. And Mike Rowley, who's a good friend too. Mike himself, he comes from a family that has, people that have been involved, I think back to the Battle of Hastings in 1215. And he's documented all that, well he does. But Mike personally has overseen the identifying and the placing of markers for over 300 soldiers that had disappeared from time. And these guys are passionate about their love of history. And they use it in a very good way. All right. This gives you an idea of one cavalry unit from Iowa. Look at the top. Key Ridge, Arkansas. Alabama, Kirksville, Missouri, Alabama, Vicksburg, Mississippi, Little Rock, Arkansas. And then on Sherman's March, Columbus, Georgia. They're everywhere. And that's mostly in one year, 1865. In one year. They're everywhere. Seeing the elephant is an expression for this is not going to be an easy or limited war. This is going to be long and bloody. And Shiloh, the number's 24,000 people killed, exceeding all previous wars combined. In one battle in 2 days in southern Tennessee. Read a little bit further down, they talk about this. I think somewhere up there they had, 1 in 4 of those killed from the Union forces were Iowa kids. And I mentioned this before, Ken Burns' series has, I think, half of one segment devoted to Shiloh. In that first day, the Confederates are winning. Now, Nathan Forrest is one of the brilliant Southern commanders. They're on the verge of pushing the Union forces into the river and wiping them out. And there are Iowa and Illinois farm kids. This is their first battle for a lot of them. They refuse to give up after assault, after assault, after assault. It's called a hornet's nest. The bark is off the trees. I mean, it's just nonstop. The only thing that stopped the carnage was nightfall. And you've got a quote from Grant there. The field is covered with dead. You have a hard time putting your foot on the ground. There are bodies everywhere. 24,000. And this is just the beginning. Antietam, in one day, you're going to have nearly 25,000. Gettysburg, in 2.5 days, 60,000. We're getting too good at this. All right. I mentioned the comment about Mississippi and the part of their budget used for limbs. All right. While lying in camp, a good deal of sickness, dying by scores. My numbers I gave you before, that more than 2 times as, or time and a half as many died from disease as died in combat. Iowa kids, and they're just. You all know the Sullivan brothers, the Juno, World War II. 5 brothers that died in the South Pacific. Okay, how many of you have ever heard of the Littleton brothers? Anyone? If you go out by Toolsboro, Iowa, right along the Mississippi, there's a monument to the Littleton brothers. These are 6 brothers, 10 kids in the family, 4 girls, 6 boys, all died in the Civil War. All died in the Civil War, and hardly anyone knows their name. And there's a reason. They're mulatto. They're mulatto. There is a monument now, and we donated money, our Civil War roundtable. A lot of others did too. And there are actually a couple songs written now about the Littleton brothers. But I mean, these families, when I said, these kids recruited each other. We said, this is going to be fun, this is going to be adventure. No. They're going to find out the hard way. All right? And but anyway, on waking in the morning, barely see 1 or 2 cots out. I was trained as an Army medic during the Vietnam War. Okay? And what you're taught is basic meatball surgery and triage. And basically, can't be saved, call the priest. Maybe, okay? Get a doctor over here, get a medic over here. Can be saved, can wait. I mean, that's basically it. We worked with burn victims for Vietnam, Agent Orange and everything else, at Brooke Army Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. And and frontline medics, again, I think in Afghanistan gave out something like 7 or 8 medals of honor to frontline medics. And because of how many lives they oftentimes shot 2 or 3 times, dragging wounded soldiers back behind the lines. And all right. Alexander Clark. You can read it yourself. Kind of a trick question is, when were the slaves ultimately freed? Now we just, you guys all know Juneteenth, just Galveston, Texas, to free the slaves. A 2-page essay I had in my textbook was called The Day of Jubilee. And it asked the same question. Did the Emancipation Proclamation free any slaves? No. The end of the war free any slaves? No. Did the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendments, the post-Civil War amendments, free any slaves? No. You know when you were free? When your master heard hoof beats coming down the lane, and a bunch of guys in blue uniforms with guns pointed said, your slaves are free, aren't they? That's when you were free. That's when you were free. The slaves simply walked away. And some of them, because the war was so devastating in the South, they didn't have anywhere to go. So they went back to where they'd been before. They went back. Technically free, no longer chattel. Okay? But so there is no one day. That's the final day in Texas where slaves were freed, Juneteenth, well after the surrender by Lee to Grant in April of 1865. But Alexander Clark, you can see at the bottom, 1 regiment, 1st Colored Infantry Regiment, the 60th U.S. Regiment of Infantry Colored Volunteers. Clark is an amazing story because he came here to Iowa as a territory, and he basically set up a barbershop in Muscatine. And Clark went on to buy a lot of property in the Muscatine area and provided fireboat or wood for the steamboats going up and down the river. And pretty soon he's one of the wealthier people in Muscatine. Muscatine had a small black community, and later on after the war, his son will be the first law school graduate at the University of Iowa. His daughter Susan will take a case of wanting to go to a public school to the Iowa Supreme Court and wins. Before the Civil War, Iowa was anti-slave, but it was also racist. If you were a free slave in Iowa, you had to carry with you a certificate of freedom that you had to pay $500 for. How many people? You could not serve on a jury involving white people. You could not intermarry. These were all Jim Crow laws in Iowa before the Civil War. All right? Even during the war, there were a lot of people opposed to blacks coming here for different reasons. A lot of the Irish that came to the eastern part of Iowa were afraid that the freed slaves would take jobs, economic reasons. So, you know, the reasons differed and so on, but we weren't real friendly towards blacks, before the war. And then we'll go from not very friendly to one of the first states after the war to pass a civil rights law, one of the first states to do that. But he